There was a time when tattoos meant rebellion, a quiet middle finger to society, a symbol that someone refused to fit in. But look around now. Walk into any gym, any coffee shop, any airport. The ink is everywhere. What used to feel rare now feels expected, normal, almost automatic. And that is exactly why the people who never get tattoos have become psychologically fascinating. Because in a world obsessed with displaying identity, constantly broadcasting personality, pain, beliefs, and self-expression onto the body, some people deliberately choose absolute silence instead. No symbols, no slogans, no permanent marks saying, "This is who I am." And honestly, most people completely misunderstand them. They assume these people are conservative, scared of needles, too serious, too plain. But cognitive psychology suggests something far deeper is happening beneath the surface. I remember sitting across from someone years ago who had absolutely no tattoos, while nearly everyone around him did, and when someone asked why, he just smiled and said, "I don't want the version of me from 10 years ago making decisions for the version of me I haven't met yet." And for some reason, that sentence never left my mind. Because maybe the refusal to get tattooed is not fear at all. Maybe it is a different relationship with identity itself. A different relationship with freedom. And if videos like this genuinely make you think deeper about human behavior and mindset psychology, subscribe to the channel. These conversations only get deeper from here. And that is where the psychology becomes incredibly interesting. Because for many people who never get tattoos, the real issue is not the ink itself. It is permanence. It is the uncomfortable feeling of freezing one emotional version of themselves onto their body forever. People with highly fluid identities often experience life very differently from everyone around them. They do not see themselves as one fixed personality. They see themselves as constantly evolving, constantly shedding old beliefs, old mindsets, old versions of who they used to be. I remember looking back at photos of myself from just 5 years earlier and realizing I barely recognized the person I was emotionally back then. Different fears, different dreams, different priorities. And that realization can make permanent decisions feel psychologically heavy. Because what feels meaningful at 22 may feel emotionally distant at 35. What feels like identity today may eventually become evidence of a version of yourself you quietly outgrew years ago. That is why many untattooed people are deeply protective of future freedom. They want the ability to change completely without carrying visual reminders of past identities everywhere they go. And if you notice this pattern in yourself, where your personality keeps evolving faster than the people around you can understand, that may be one of the clearest signs your mind was never built to stay emotionally still for very long. And when you combine that constantly evolving identity with the modern world we live in, another psychological pattern starts appearing very clearly. Many people who reject tattoos are also deeply exhausted by overstimulation itself. Everywhere you look, people are broadcasting who they are, their politics, their trauma, their beliefs, their personality, their entire identity displayed outwardly for constant interpretation and validation. And after a while, some minds begin craving the exact opposite. Silence, privacy, space. I remember sitting in a crowded restaurant once, watching people covered in symbols, quotes, dates, and meanings, and strangely, the person who stood out the most to me was the one with absolutely nothing on their skin at all. Because there was something psychologically calm about them. Nothing demanding attention. Nothing trying to explain itself. And that quietness felt rare. People who remain completely untattooed often have a very different relationship with self-expression. They do not feel the same emotional need to externalize their identity for the world to constantly see. To them, the body is not a billboard, not a public diary, not a performance. It is simply the place they exist in. And if you deeply relate to feeling emotionally drained by constant noise, oversharing, and attention-seeking behavior around you, that may be a strong sign. Your mind naturally values internal identity far more than external display. And underneath all of this, there is another layer most people never even think about. Long-term psychological calculation. Because for many people who refuse tattoos, the decision is not emotional at all. It is deeply analytical. Their brain naturally projects forward into the future before making permanent choices. They think about how identity changes, how meaning changes, how society changes. I remember talking to someone who once said, "The problem isn't whether I like the tattoo today. The problem is whether I'll still emotionally connect to it 20 years from now." And honestly, that mindset reveals something important. Some minds are wired to prioritize adaptability over attachment. Their brain constantly scans for future consequences, future regret, future limitations. Not out of fear, but out of psychological strategy. They notice how trends fade, how people evolve, how the body ages. And because of that, permanently modifying themselves can feel mentally restrictive instead of emotionally freeing. If you are someone who overthinks major decisions for weeks, replays future scenarios in your head, and instinctively avoids choices that permanently lock you into one version of yourself, there is a strong chance your brain naturally operates through long-term survival thinking. And if this part feels deeply personal to you, comment number 7 below. I genuinely want to know how many people quietly think this way, but rarely say it out loud. And maybe that is why the entire meaning of tattoos has quietly changed over time. Decades ago, tattoos symbolized rebellion. They separated people from the crowd. But now, almost everyone is trying to stand out in exactly the same way. And strangely, that has made remaining completely untouched feel psychologically rare again. I remember walking through a beach one summer surrounded by endless symbols, sleeves, quotes, and designs. And the person who unexpectedly captured my attention most was the one with completely blank skin. Not because they looked better, but because they looked comfortable without needing to announce anything. And that calmness felt powerful. In a culture constantly pushing people to display their identity outwardly, some individuals choose to keep parts of themselves private instead. Not because they have nothing to express, but because they no longer feel the need to prove who they are to strangers. And if you have ever felt more connected to silence than self-display, that may be one of the clearest signs your confidence comes from internal certainty rather than external validation. And when you really step back and look at all of these patterns together, you begin realizing something deeper. Many people who never get tattoos are not rejecting art. They are protecting psychological completeness. They do not feel an internal need to carve meaning into their body because they already carry that meaning quietly within themselves. I remember hearing someone say once, "The most important parts of me cannot be seen anyway." And honestly, that sentence explains this mindset better than almost anything else. Because some people build identity externally, while others build it internally. One needs symbols to feel understood. The other finds peace being unreadable. And neither approach is automatically wrong. But people who remain completely untattooed often possess a very private relationship with who they are emotionally. Their memories stay inside them. Their pain stays inside them. Their growth stays inside them. They do not always feel the urge to turn every meaningful experience into something visually permanent. And if you have ever felt strangely protective over your inner world, almost like certain parts of you are too personal to place on display for strangers, that may be a major sign your identity was built through internal depth rather than external attention. And if this quietly describes you too, comment number 7 below. I think more people relate to this than society realizes. And maybe after hearing all of this, you are starting to understand something important about yourself. Choosing not to get tattoos does not automatically make someone boring, closed-minded, or emotionally disconnected. Sometimes it means the exact opposite. Sometimes it means their mind values freedom more than permanence, privacy more than performance, inner identity more than external display. I remember reaching a point in my own life where I stopped feeling the need to explain every part of myself to the world around me. And strangely, the less I tried to visibly prove who I was, the more emotionally secure I became internally. Because real confidence often becomes quieter with time. It stops needing constant validation, constant attention, constant visibility. And that may be the hidden psychology behind people who remain completely uninked in a world obsessed with self-display. Their silence is not emptiness. Their blank skin is not lack of depth. In many cases, it is simply a reflection of a person who no longer feels the need to turn their identity into something publicly consumable. So if this video made you feel understood in a way most people rarely do, make sure you subscribe to the channel and support the next videos. We are going to keep exploring the deeper psychological patterns hidden inside everyday human behavior that most people never stop long enough to notice.